Now let's talk about the exhaust pipes back here. Before we begin modeling, let me just say this. In any realistic scenario, you probably would not go through the trouble of actually modeling these holes like I'm about to do. That's just fucking crazy. It's completely unnecessary. You're gonna have a million little polygons in here. Maybe if you're trying to do really close-up renders of the exhaust pipe and you really need it to look cute, then you would use the method that I'm about to use. Otherwise, realistically, you're probably just going to use texture maps and shit like that. You're gonna have an alpha map with a bunch of dots, and those dots are going to be used to create transparency, and you can hardly tell the difference. Besides, you cannot see the holes from the outside, you can only see them from the inside, so you're really only going to see them at a very specific angle if you're looking at this part from very close up, and also if the lighting is such that you can actually see this shit inside the pipe in the back of the car. That being said, I am going to model this properly, and then later we can do something to reduce the number of polygons. So here's what you're going to do. We're going to create something that looks roughly like this. The first thing that came to my mind when I looked at this object was this. I was going to create a circle, and I gave that circle, let's say, 128 vertices, and then I would extrude that up at a bunch of little loop cuts here to turn this into little squares. And then when I have these little squares here, then I can take some of the vertices like this. I can use my loop tool, circle tool, to turn those shapes into a circle. Of course, when you use the circle tool here, you have to uncheck flatten, because otherwise the geometry is going to become flat, and that's going to create some deformations, which are going to give you some shading artifacts. Probably they won't be visible in this situation, but it's not going to be perfect. And if you want it to be perfect like I do, you're going to do it the following way. You're going to uncheck flatten, get rid of the vertices, and there you go. Now you got these little holes. And then I was thinking about taking this shape, using the spin tool to arrange that in a circle. Then I said, wait a minute, and I stopped myself because I got a better idea. I figured this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have two circles here. There's 3 faces between them, which means another 1, 2, 3 faces. There's going to be another circle over here, and then there's going to be another layer up here. Well, that's not going to work because we need to have a circle exactly in between these two, which means we have to first of all increase the distance. So when we select these vertices, we have to have 5 vertices between them and not just 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, click, and then we go loop tool circle, and then we can select another set of vertices up here between these circles, and again we go W loop tool circle. We got to make sure that they're exactly the same distance. So to get from here to here, you have to go 1, 2, 3 left, and then 1, 2, 3 up, which is perfect. However, how are we going to go over this entire surface doing the same shit over and over again? Look how many holes we got to create, and besides, these holes are way too large compared to the ones we have over here, so we're going to need to create more holes, which means we need more geometry, which means this would take about 19 years to make if we do it this way. So here's what we're going to do instead. First of all, we have to have more vertices on our circle, and since we had 1 selected, 5 deselected, 1 selected, that is when we were selecting vertices for the circle tool, you remember, that effectively means that each circle is occupying 6 edges on this circle. So that means that the number of vertices we have here has to be a multiple of 6. Now, since I'm high IQ, right off the top of my head, I already know that 120 is a multiple of 6, which means 126 is also a multiple of 6, but that's less vertices than we had here before, so that's not going to cut it. I was thinking of at least doubling the number of vertices we have here, so let's take 126, we're going to multiply that by 2, that gives us 252. Remember that number. This is going to be important, which is, by the way, the reason why I always have my statistics open up here in the top left corner. In case you don't have that, I probably mentioned this before, but you go over here to mesh edit mode overlays, not mesh edit mode overlays, you go over here to the other one, viewport overlays, and you check statistics. That's going to tell you how many edges you have selected in a particular object. So we got 252 edges. Now, the other thing we want to keep in mind if we want to be perfect, and I'm being perfect, guys, just because I want to teach you how to do things properly. Probably it's not going to matter most of the time, but I just want to show you the most complex advanced tools that I can show you. I want to make sure that you guys can do this shit surgically, and that way when it really does matter, and it is going to matter from time to time, you're going to be ready. You're not going to do this like an amateur, you're going to do it like a pro. So you're going to take this object right here, you're going to go to side view, and we got our 3D cursor right here in the middle, and of course we can't just extrude this up and add a bunch of little loop cuts here because that's never going to give us perfect squares. It's pretty damn close, but it's not perfect, and we want it to be perfect. So instead, we're not going to extrude nothing. We're going to place the cursor in the middle, and we're going to take the next vertex here, and we're just going to rotate that by, what's that, 90 degrees. And then if we create an edge between that vertex and the one underneath it, where the fuck is it? I can barely even see it, but if we create an edge right there, that edge has the exact same length as the edge underneath, which means now if we place the cursor up here and we extrude this and we scale it up, or rather we scale it down to 0, we align it with this vertex, now this is a perfect little also square. These edges are exactly the same length, which means now if we stack this cylindrical shape right here, we're going to have a large cylinder which consists of squares only, which is perfect for creating little circles. So now we're going to go to add modifier, we're going to go to generate, and we're going to use the legacy just because it's simpler. The new array modifier is better and we're going to use it in a moment, but it's got all this different shit and I don't want to navigate all these boxes right now. I just want to quickly be able to stack this to 1 on the z-axis, 0 on the other axes, give me 4 count, and we're going to apply the array modifier. And now check this out, remember we want to have a circle here, and then we want to have 5 vertices and then another circle. So these two are going to be circles. I don't want to manually go around this entire band selecting that shit. Here's what we're going to do instead. You're going to select this edge segment, you're going to go up here to select, you're going to go to checker deselect, and down here in the checker deselected menu by default you're going to have 1 1 0. You want to set that to 5 1 0 because that means you're going to have 5 deselected and then you're going to have 1 selected and another 5 deselected and 1 selected. Sometimes it might be a little bit busted up to where you're going to have 2 vertices close together. Sometimes you're going to have to adjust the offset if you want to get it right. In this case it works properly. God knows why it fails sometimes. You know how it is with Blender. Anyway, hopefully you don't have to adjust the offset. And now with all these vertices selected, you just go W loop tool circle, make sure you uncheck flatten there, and you can delete vertex, and there you go. Now this is one band ready to go, or one segment ready to go. But here's what we gotta do next. We can't just stack these up with the array modifier because that's not gonna work properly. We need them to be like this. We need it to be a sort of zigzag or whatever you would use to describe this pattern. And this is where the legacy array modifier fails because we cannot control the rotation of the next segment with the old array modifier, but we can do that with the new one. So instead of using the old legacy shitty array modifier where we would have to use object offset and then an empty which is rotated, we're gonna get rid of that modifier. We're going to go add modifier, generate array, the new one, the better one. First of all, set the X offset to 0, set the Z offset to 1, and down here you're going to see we got rotation, so we can rotate each next instance by a certain number of degrees here. Now the question is, how many degrees do we want to rotate it by so that all these vertices here connect perfectly? And to get that number, we're going to have to do a little bit of math. Now remember, this circle here has 252 edges. That means that the number of degrees occupied by one of these edges is 1 over 252 multiplied by 365, because 365 is the number of degrees in a full circle. Everybody knows that unless you didn't go to school. So if in this box right here we write 360 divided by 252 and we hit enter, you're going to see that it's going to move to the side by exactly 1 edge. Now that's still not what we want. We want this to move to the side by 1, 2, 3 edges because we want this vertex to be aligned with this one down here. So that means we just have to multiply that number by 3. Now I don't want to take this decimal right here because that's not the exact number. Probably doesn't matter in this situation. Look how many decimal places we have right here. But if you want to be exact, if you want to be surgical, if you want to be a professional, you're going to do this. You're going to type in 3 multiplied by 360 divided by 252, and then you're going to hit enter. And as you can see, that gives you exactly the right angle. So now all you got to do is crank up this value over here to whatever you want. So let's try something like 24. Make sure you use an even number because that way you can duplicate this just using your old array modifier, or you can even manually stack it if you want to. And now this is going to be the inner surface of our pipe. Now let's bring that into that hole that we have over there. We're going to snap that right there with our 3D cursor. We're going to focus on that. First of all, we want to rotate that by -90 on the X. We're going to bring it around here. Now let me look at my reference images one more time. So you can see here that we have this outer shell, and by the way, this is set at an angle, so it's like there's an angled cut right there, which we will get to. But first, let's create this outer shell. To create that outer shell, all we have to do is take one of these circles here. You don't need to use this exact circle. You really don't need that many polygons. You can use a circle which has half the number of polygons. So for example, we can just duplicate that circle, select checker, deselect, 1 deselected, 1 selected, X dissolve vertices, and there you go. Now we have fewer vertices because we really wouldn't need 252. But what's the thickness? The thickness is something like this. And then over here at the end, we just extrude this inwards a little bit, and we extrude it again. We push it inside the pipe. Maybe this is a little bit too thick, so maybe we're just going to scale this part up a little bit or scale the outer part down a little bit, something like this. We're going to play around with it until it looks right, and eventually we can take these edges here, we can bevel them with Control B. That's going to allow us to use our smooth shading right there. Maybe if you want to make this a little bit cooler, you can also add an extra segment here so we can scale this part up a little bit, bevel this edge segment right here just to make that a little bit more rounded. And then once we do that, now we're going to bevel these edges over here on the front, set the profile shape there to 1, and there we go. Object select shade smooth, we're good to go. Now, since we went through the trouble of creating this surface manually and not just using some kind of a texture map, we got to remember that the main benefit of having that as part of the 3D model is that we can actually create thickness on this little mesh on the inside. So if you look very closely, if you want to do some close-up shots or something, which may or may not be the case, but again, I'm just doing this for the sake of the exercise, you're not going to want to see paper thin holes. You're going to want to see some thickness. Now, what we don't want to do is select this entire object and then just extrude that with Alt-E extrude faces along normals, and there's that, because that creates a whole separate surface on the backside which we can't even see. Now, well, we are going to use this method, but we just got to remember to delete the faces on the backside because you're really not going to see those. So you can just delete those faces. And now, of course, since we got our smooth shading, you got this shitty effect right here because the smooth shading is going between the circle and the faces right around it. So to contain that, we're just going to select one of these little circles like this. Shift G, select similar face angles. That's going to select all the circles. Hopefully it doesn't really select all of them, so we're just going to increase the threshold a little bit and then deselect some of the edges which are part of the same object which we don't want selected. And then we can just create tiny little bevels here with Control B. We're going to uncheck loop slide. Of course, you can also do this with the bevel modifier, but there you go. Now again, this is a very high number of polygons. This shit is not optimized for a game, guys. The purpose of this here is getting very high quality visuals like you would see on commercials and shit. So we don't care about polygon counts, we don't care about render times, all we care about is having top quality renders. So as a matter of fact, I might even go ahead and throw a subdivision surface modifier on this object if I do decide to do close-up renders. You can see that the circles become much nicer and they look much smoother. Who knows what kind of shots I'm going to be able to create with this. So there we go, now we got our exhaust pipes. The next step is going to be creating these little hexagonal shapes that we have right here on this surface around the pipes. I'm going to continue modeling this thing on my Patreon page. So if you guys want to see more car modeling videos like this, if you want to see how I'm going to create some cool visuals for this Aston Martin that I'm modeling later on, then go check out my Patreon page. Is linked down in the description. You can also ask me a question. I do Q&As and shit like that. Anyway, like the video, subscribe to the channel, let me know down below what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.